The gavel came down at precisely 10:15 on a Tuesday morning that would redefine the boundaries between authority and accountability. Police Commissioner Vincent Torino walked into Providence Municipal Court like he owned the building. Three-piece suit, polished badge gleaming on his lapel, flanked by two deputy commissioners who moved like they were escorting royalty rather than responding to a subpoena. Commissioner Torino had been summoned to explain why his department had ignored 17 court orders regarding evidence disclosure in pending cases. But as he approached the defendant's table, his demeanor suggested he viewed this hearing as nothing more than an inconvenience. Judge Caprio looked up from his docket and immediately sensed something was different about this morning. The commissioner's entrance had drawn whispered conversations from the gallery. Court officers shifted uncomfortably. Even the clerk, Miss Rodriguez, paused her typing to observe the unusual tension filling the courtroom. This wasn't going to be a routine administrative hearing. Before you see what happens when the highest-ranking police official in the city challenges a sitting judge, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to Court of Kindness. Today's lesson is about what happens when power meets power and only one can remain standing. Commissioner Torino had built his reputation over 23 years in law enforcement. He'd climbed from patrol officer to commissioner through a combination of political savvy, strategic alliances, and an unwavering belief that police authority superseded most other forms of civic power. His department controlled evidence, investigations, and arrests. His budget exceeded $40 million annually. His officers numbered over 800. In his mind, judges were simply another bureaucratic obstacle to navigate, not authority figures to respect. Judge Caprio had seen commissioners before. He'd presided over cases involving police misconduct, evidence tampering, and departmental policy disputes. But he'd never encountered a police official who walked into his courtroom with such visible contempt for the judicial process. The commissioner's body language spoke volumes. Arms crossed, jaw set, eyes scanning the room like he was evaluating threats rather than participating in a legal proceeding. Miss Rodriguez called the case. Matter number 2025-ADM 7412, City of Providence versus Police Department. Failure to comply with discovery orders, contempt of court proceedings. Commissioner Vincent Torino representing the department. Judge Caprio gestured toward the witness stand. Commissioner Torino, please take the stand and be sworn in. The commissioner remained seated. He looked at his deputy commissioners, then back at the judge, and spoke in a voice that carried across the silent courtroom. I don't think that's necessary, Your Honor. We can handle this matter from here. We have legal counsel prepared to address your concerns. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Judge Caprio set his pen down slowly, deliberately, the way he did when something fundamental had just shifted in his courtroom. Commissioner Torino, this court issued 17 separate orders for evidence disclosure over the past 4 months. Your department has ignored every single one. You are here to explain why and to demonstrate compliance. That requires you to be sworn in and testify under oath. Commissioner Torino stood, but instead of moving toward the witness stand, he approached the bench. Your Honor, with respect, my department operates under city charter authority that grants us discretion over evidence management. These orders interfere with ongoing investigations. We've prepared a written response that addresses your concerns without compromising operational security. Judge Caprio's expression remained calm, but everyone in the courtroom could sense the storm building beneath his composed exterior. Commissioner, I'm not asking for your written response. I'm ordering you to take the stand and explain under oath why your department has defied 17 court orders. This is not optional. This is not negotiable. This is how the legal system works. Commissioner Torino's face flushed red. He looked at the gallery, at his deputies, at the court officers, as if expecting someone to intervene on his behalf. When no help materialized, he turned back to Judge Caprio with an expression of barely contained rage. Your Honor, I think you're forgetting who you're dealing with here. My department has 800 officers. We control public safety in this city. We have relationships with federal agencies, state prosecutors, and city officials that go back decades. You may run this courtroom, but we run the streets. And frankly, Your Honor, you have no power over me. The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Every person in the courtroom understood they had just witnessed something unprecedented. A sitting police commissioner had just told a sitting judge that judicial authority meant nothing. Judge Caprio stood slowly. In 38 years on the bench, he had never seen such a direct challenge to the authority of the court. He had dealt with angry defendants, uncooperative witnesses, and defiant attorneys. But he had never encountered a public official who openly declared himself above the law in open court. The commissioner's statement wasn't just disrespectful. It was a fundamental attack on the separation of powers that formed the backbone of American democracy. "Commissioner Torino," Judge Caprio said quietly, "did you just tell this court that I have no power over you?" The commissioner's jaw was set in defiance. His deputies looked uncomfortable, but they remained silent. The gallery held its collective breath. Commissioner Torino had reached a point of no return, and everyone in the room knew it.
That's exactly what I said, Your Honor. My authority derives from the city charter and state law enforcement statutes. Your authority is limited to this courtroom. Outside these walls, you're just another citizen. Inside these walls, you depend on my officers for security and order. The implications of this statement were staggering. Commissioner Torino wasn't just claiming immunity from judicial oversight. He was suggesting that judges existed at the pleasure of police departments. That court orders were suggestions rather than legal requirements. That the badge trumped the gavel in matters of civic authority. Judge Caprio had presided over thousands of cases involving the delicate balance between law enforcement and judicial authority. He understood that police departments needed operational flexibility. He respected the dangerous and difficult work that officers performed daily. But what Commissioner Torino had just articulated wasn't a request for operational flexibility. It was a declaration of independence from judicial oversight. "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Caprio said calmly, "please note for the record that Commissioner Vincent Torino has stated, and I quote, 'You have no power over me, and your authority is limited to this courtroom. Outside these walls, you're just another citizen.'" The stenographer's fingers moved rapidly across her machine, capturing every word for posterity. "Commissioner," Judge Caprio continued, "your statement suggests that you believe police authority supersedes judicial authority, that court orders are optional when they conflict with your operational preferences, that the constitutional principle of checks and balances doesn't apply to your department. Is that an accurate characterization of your position?" Commissioner Torino's confidence hadn't wavered. If anything, he seemed emboldened by what he perceived as the judge's inability to respond with force. "Your Honor, I'm simply stating facts. You can issue all the orders you want. But if my department determines that compliance would compromise public safety or ongoing investigations, we have the authority to prioritize our responsibilities over your paperwork." The word paperwork was delivered with unmistakable contempt. In Commissioner Torino's worldview, court orders were administrative inconveniences rather than legal mandates. Evidence disclosure requirements were suggestions rather than constitutional obligations. Judicial oversight was bureaucratic interference rather than democratic necessity. Judge Caprio had reached a crossroads that would define not just this hearing, but the relationship between law enforcement and judicial authority in Providence for years to come. He could respond with legal citations and procedural arguments. He could explain the constitutional framework that established judicial supremacy in matters of law. He could lecture about the separation of powers and the Founding Fathers' intent. But Commissioner Torino had made his challenge personal, direct, and public. The response needed to match the gravity of the moment. Judge Caprio looked at the commissioner for what felt like an eternity, but lasted only 12 seconds. Those 12 seconds would become legendary in Providence legal circles. 12 seconds of silence that separated the moment before a police commissioner thought he was above the law from the moment he learned otherwise. "Commissioner Torino," Judge Caprio said quietly, "I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Your badge does not grant you immunity from judicial authority. Your department does not exist independently of the constitutional framework that governs this nation. Your officers take an oath to uphold the law, not to decide which laws apply to them and which don't." The commissioner shifted his weight, but maintained his defiant posture.
His deputy commissioners exchanged nervous glances. They had followed their boss into this confrontation, but they were beginning to realize that Commissioner Torino had miscalculated badly. The legal ground beneath their feet was crumbling with each word the judge spoke. "You have stated on the record that I have no power over you," Judge Caprio continued. "Let me clarify something fundamental about how our system of government actually works. This court derives its authority from the Constitution of the United States and the laws of Rhode Island. That authority doesn't depend on your recognition or approval. It exists whether you acknowledge it or not." Commissioner Torino's face was growing redder. He had expected the judge to back down, to negotiate, to recognize the practical reality that courts needed police cooperation to function. Instead, Judge Caprio was doubling down on judicial authority in a way that left no room for compromise or face-saving retreat. Furthermore, Judge Caprio said, "Your statement that my authority is limited to this courtroom demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how judicial power operates. When this court issues an order, it carries the full force of law everywhere in this jurisdiction. When your department ignores that order, you're not just disrespecting me personally, you're attacking the rule of law itself." The gallery was riveted. Court reporters would later describe the tension as electric. Every person in the room understood they were witnessing a constitutional crisis playing out in real time. The highest-ranking police official in the city had openly defied judicial authority, and a sitting judge was responding with unprecedented directness. "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Caprio said, "please contact the Rhode Island State Police and request that a senior investigator respond to this courthouse immediately. We're going to need independent law enforcement assistance." Commissioner Torino's confidence flickered for the first time. The mention of state police suggested that Judge Caprio was escalating this confrontation beyond the local level, beyond the commissioner's sphere of influence. "Your Honor," one of the deputy commissioners said quietly, "perhaps we can reach some accommodation." Commissioner Torino shot him a withering look that said more about departmental dynamics than any internal affairs investigation could reveal. The commissioner had surrounded himself with subordinates who feared his authority more than they respected judicial process. "There will be no accommodation," Judge Caprio replied. Commissioner Torino has made his position clear. He believes police authority supersedes judicial authority. He has stated that court orders are optional when they conflict with his operational preferences. Those aren't positions that can be accommodated within a constitutional framework. They're positions that must be corrected. Commissioner Torino seemed to realize for the first time that this confrontation wasn't going to end with handshakes and promises to do better. Judge Caprio wasn't interested in saving face or finding middle ground. The judge was treating this as what it actually was: a fundamental challenge to the separation of powers that required a definitive response. "Commissioner," Judge Caprio said, "I'm going to give you one final opportunity to acknowledge the authority of this court and comply with its orders. You can apologize for your statements, take the witness stand, and provide the testimony and evidence this court has repeatedly requested, or you can continue to maintain that you are above judicial oversight." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Everyone in the courtroom understood that Commissioner Torino had reached a decision point that would determine not just the outcome of this hearing, but potentially the trajectory of his entire career. He could swallow his pride, acknowledge judicial authority, and walk out of the courthouse with his position intact. Or he could double down on his defiance and face consequences he clearly hadn't anticipated when he walked into the courtroom that morning. Commissioner Torino looked at his deputies, at the gallery, at the court officers who worked under his ultimate authority. He seemed to be calculating whether his political connections and departmental influence could protect him from whatever Judge Caprio had in mind. The calculation was taking too long, and everyone could see it happening in real time. "Your Honor," Commissioner Torino said finally, "I stand by everything I've said. My department operates under authority that doesn't require your approval. We'll continue to manage evidence and investigations according to our professional judgment, regardless of what orders this court issues. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with the mayor, the city council, or the state attorney general." The die was cast. Commissioner Torino had chosen defiance over accommodation, pride over pragmatism, confrontation over compromise. Judge Caprio nodded once, as if the commissioner's response had confirmed something he already suspected about the man's character and judgment.
Very well, Commissioner, Judge Caprio said. You've made your choice clear. Miss Rodriguez, please note that Commissioner Vincent Torino has refused to acknowledge the authority of this court and has declared his intention to continue ignoring lawfully issued orders. The stenographer's machine clicked steadily as she recorded words that would become part of legal history. Officer Martinez, Judge Caprio said, addressing the senior court officer, please approach the bench. Court Officer Martinez, a 20-year veteran who had worked under 3 different judges, stepped forward with visible reluctance. He had never been asked to arrest a police commissioner, and the implications of what was about to happen were not lost on him. Commissioner Vincent Torino, Judge Caprio said formally, you are hereby found in direct contempt of court. Your statements constitute a willful and deliberate defiance of judicial authority made in the immediate presence of this court. Your refusal to comply with lawfully issued orders represents ongoing contempt that undermines the administration of justice. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Commissioner Torino's face went from red to pale in the span of 3 seconds. His deputy commissioners stepped back instinctively, creating physical distance between themselves and their boss, as if contempt of court might be contagious. Officer Martinez remained frozen at the bench, caught between his duty to the court and the reality that he was about to arrest the man who controlled his department's budget and personnel decisions. Commissioner Torino's voice cracked slightly when he spoke. Your Honor, you can't be serious. I'm the police commissioner of Providence. I have immunity from arrest in the performance of my official duties. You don't have the authority to order my arrest. Judge Caprio's expression remained unchanged, but his voice carried the weight of 38 years of judicial experience. Commissioner, immunity from arrest applies to civil matters and minor infractions. It does not extend to direct contempt of court committed in the presence of a sitting judge. The commissioner looked around the courtroom desperately, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. His political connections couldn't help him now. His departmental authority meant nothing in this moment. His badge, which had opened doors and commanded respect for over 2 decades, had become a liability rather than an asset. The very position that had given him the confidence to challenge judicial authority was now powerless to protect him from its consequences. Officer Martinez, Judge Caprio continued, you are hereby ordered to take Commissioner Vincent Torino into custody for contempt of court. He will be held pending a determination of appropriate sanctions. The senior court officer looked at Commissioner Torino, then back at Judge Caprio. Your Honor, with respect, should we wait for state police to arrive? The question revealed the unprecedented nature of the situation. Local court officers reporting to arrest their ultimate boss created a conflict of interest that no one had anticipated. No, Judge Caprio replied. Contempt of court requires immediate action. The integrity of these proceedings depends on swift enforcement of judicial authority. Officer Martinez, please proceed. The court officer approached Commissioner Torino with visible reluctance. Sir, you need to come with me. The commissioner's hands were shaking now. Whether from rage or fear was impossible to determine. This is insane, Commissioner Torino said, his voice rising. You people have lost your minds. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you understand the consequences of this action? My department won't stand for this. The mayor won't stand for this. The governor won't stand for this. His threats sounded increasingly desperate rather than authoritative. Judge Caprio remained unmoved. Commissioner, your threats only confirm the necessity of this action. You continue to believe that your position places you above the law. That attitude is precisely why you're being held in contempt. Officer Martinez produced handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click as they opened seemed to echo through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. Commissioner Torino backed away from the court officer. You will not put those on me. I am the police commissioner of this city. I demand to speak to my attorney. I demand to speak to the mayor. I demand to be released immediately. His demands carried no weight in a courtroom where he had just declared judicial authority meaningless. Judge Caprio's voice remained steady. You have the right to an attorney, Commissioner. You have the right to make phone calls from the holding facility. But you do not have the right to continue disrupting these proceedings. The deputy commissioners watched in horror as their boss's career imploded in real time. They had followed him into this courtroom, expecting a routine administrative hearing. Instead, They were witnessing the arrest of the highest-ranking police official in Providence history for contempt of court. Neither deputy moved to intervene. Both understood that helping Commissioner Torino resist arrest would only result in their own arrests for obstruction of justice. Officer Martinez stepped closer to the commissioner. "Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Commissioner Torino looked at the handcuffs, then at Judge Caprio, then at the gallery filled with court personnel who would spread news of this arrest throughout the city within hours. His political career was ending. His law enforcement career was ending. His reputation was ending, all because he had convinced himself that badge trumped gavel. "This is a mistake," Commissioner Torino said quietly as he finally turned around. "You're making a terrible mistake, Your Honor. History will vindicate my position. My department serves the public interest. Your orders compromise public safety. You're destroying the working relationship between law enforcement and the judiciary over paperwork and procedure." Judge Caprio watched as Officer Martinez placed the handcuffs on Commissioner Torino's wrists. "Commissioner," Judge Caprio said, "history will record that you told a sitting judge that court orders were optional, that you declared yourself above judicial oversight, that you refused to comply with constitutional requirements for evidence disclosure. History will show that when confronted with a choice between acknowledging legal authority and maintaining personal pride, you chose pride. The consequences you're experiencing are not my mistake. They're your choice." The handcuffs clicked into place. Commissioner Vincent Torino, the man who had commanded 800 police officers and controlled a $40 million budget, was now in custody in a municipal courtroom for contempt of court. The symbolism was powerful and unmistakable. No position, no matter how prestigious or powerful, placed anyone above the law when they challenged judicial authority directly. Officer Martinez began the perp walk toward the holding area. Commissioner Torino's face was ashen now, the reality of his situation finally penetrating the arrogance that had brought him to this moment. As they reached the courtroom door, he turned back one final time. "Your Honor, this isn't over. You haven't heard the last of this. My supporters won't forget what happened here today." Judge Caprio nodded slightly. "Commissioner, I certainly hope this isn't over. I hope this moment serves as a reminder to every public official in this state that judicial authority exists to protect constitutional rights, not to accommodate political convenience." The door closed behind Commissioner Torino and Officer Martinez with a soft thud that seemed to reverberate through the courthouse. The deputy commissioners stood alone at the defendant's table, uncertain whether they should leave, stay, or follow their boss to the holding area. Judge Caprio looked at them with something approaching sympathy. "Deputy commissioners, you are not responsible for your superiors' choices. You are, however, responsible for your own actions going forward." Deputy Commissioner Sarah Chen, a 20-year veteran who had hoped to succeed Torino when he retired, stepped forward. "Your Honor, on behalf of the Providence Police Department, I want to assure this court that we will review all outstanding discovery requests and provide full compliance with your orders. The department respects judicial authority and regrets the statements made here today." Her words were carefully chosen to distance the department from Commissioner Torino's position while preserving whatever working relationship remained possible. Judge Caprio appreciated the diplomatic tone but wasn't ready to accept assurances from subordinates of a man who had just been arrested for contempt. "Deputy Commissioner Chen, I appreciate your statement. However, given what transpired here today, this court will require more than verbal assurances. I'm ordering an immediate review of all evidence disclosure requests pending with your department. You have 72 hours to provide a comprehensive compliance plan. Furthermore," Judge Caprio continued, "I'm recommending to the Rhode Island Supreme Court that they conduct an independent investigation into your department's evidence management practices. The statements made by Commissioner Torino suggest systemic resistance to judicial oversight that may extend beyond the cases currently before this court." Deputy Commissioner Chen nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, we understand and will cooperate fully with any investigation." The gallery began to stir as news of Commissioner Torino's arrest spread through whispered conversations and urgent text messages. Within minutes, reporters would arrive at the courthouse. Within hours, the story would dominate local news. Within days, it would become a case study in law schools across the country. Judge Caprio was acutely aware that this moment would define his legacy as much as Commissioner Torino's downfall. "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Caprio said, "please contact court administration and request additional security personnel. I expect this courthouse to receive significant media attention over the next several days. Also, please prepare a written summary of today's proceedings for immediate distribution to the Rhode Island Judicial Council and the Attorney General's office." The wheels of accountability were already turning. The deputy commissioners gathered their files and prepared to leave. They had entered the courtroom as subordinates of a powerful police commissioner. They were leaving as witnesses to his arrest and potential successors to his authority. The political dynamics of Providence law enforcement had shifted dramatically in the span of one hearing. Deputy Commissioner Chen paused at the door. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "may I ask about Commissioner Torino's status? When will he be eligible for release?" Judge Caprio considered the question carefully. "Commissioner Torino will remain in custody until he demonstrates willingness to comply with this court's authority. That could be as soon as this afternoon if he acknowledges his error and agrees to provide the testimony and evidence this court has repeatedly requested. Or it could be significantly longer if he continues to maintain that police authority supersedes judicial oversight. The choice, as always, would be Commissioner Torino's to make." Judge Caprio had learned over decades on the bench that contempt of court was often less about punishment and more about education. Some people needed to experience the consequences of their choices before they understood the importance of respecting institutional authority. Commissioner Torino was about to receive that education whether he wanted it or not. As the deputy commissioners left the courtroom, Judge Caprio remained at his bench, reviewing the morning's events in his mind. He had not anticipated arresting a police commissioner when he arrived at work that morning. But Commissioner Torino's behavior had left no alternative. Judicial authority meant nothing if judges were unwilling to enforce it when directly challenged. The separation of powers meant nothing if public officials could declare themselves exempt from constitutional oversight. The holding cell beneath Providence Municipal Court had housed thousands of defendants over the years: drug dealers, drunk drivers, domestic violence suspects, tax evaders. But it had never housed a police commissioner. The irony wasn't lost on Officer Martinez as he processed Vincent Torino's booking paperwork. 23 years of law enforcement experience had prepared the commissioner for many scenarios. Being fingerprinted and photographed in the basement of a courthouse wasn't one of them. Commissioner Torino sat on the metal bench, still wearing his three-piece suit, still wearing his badge, but no longer wearing his authority. The handcuffs had been removed, replaced by the invisible chains of judicial custody. His deputy commissioners were upstairs trying to manage the crisis he had created. His department was rudderless. His career was in freefall, all because he had convinced himself that his badge made him untouchable. Meanwhile, Judge Caprio continued the morning docket. 3 parking violations, 2 minor traffic infractions, and 1 noise complaint. Routine cases that proceeded with clockwork efficiency, while the biggest story in Providence legal history unfolded in the holding area below. The judge's demeanor remained calm, professional, unchanged by the fact that he had just ordered the arrest of the city's top law enforcement official. News of Commissioner Torino's arrest spread through Providence like wildfire. Police officers on patrol heard about it through department radio chatter. City council members received frantic phone calls from constituents. The mayor's office was bombarded with media requests for comment. By noon, 3 television news trucks had parked outside the courthouse. By 1 o'clock, that number had doubled. Deputy Commissioner Chen found herself thrust into an impossible position. She was now the acting head of a police department in crisis, fielding questions from reporters who wanted to know if the Providence police would retaliate against Judge Caprio. Her responses were measured, diplomatic, designed to prevent the situation from escalating further. "We respect the authority of the court. We are reviewing our procedures to ensure full compliance with all judicial orders. Commissioner Torino's statements do not represent the position of this department, but..." Privately, Chen knew the situation was far more complicated. Commissioner Torino had loyalists throughout the department who viewed his arrest as an attack on law enforcement itself. Some officers were already talking about work slowdowns, about refusing to provide security for court proceedings,
about making Judge Caprio's life difficult in ways that couldn't be traced back to official policy. The institutional conflict that Torino had created wouldn't end with his arrest. At 2:30 that afternoon, Commissioner Torino's attorney arrived at the courthouse. Marcus Webb had represented police officers and city officials for 15 years. He understood the delicate balance between law enforcement and judicial authority. He also understood that his client had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed with legal maneuvering. Commissioner Torino's statements were on the record. His defiance was documented. His arrest was justified under well-established contempt of court precedents. Webb's meeting with his client lasted 90 minutes. When he emerged from the holding area, his expression told the story of a lawyer who had received very bad news about a very difficult case. Commissioner Torino was maintaining his innocence, insisting that his statements were protected by executive privilege, demanding immediate release and threatening to sue everyone involved in his arrest. Webb knew that such an approach would only deepen his client's legal troubles. Judge Caprio agreed to meet with Webb in chambers at 4 o'clock. The conversation was frank, professional, and brief. "Your Honor," Webb began, "my client believes his statements were taken out of context. He was expressing frustration with what he perceives as judicial overreach in operational police matters. He meant no disrespect to this court or to your authority." Judge Caprio listened without interruption, then responded with characteristic directness. "Counselor, your client didn't express frustration. He declared judicial authority meaningless. He didn't question specific orders. He rejected the principle of judicial oversight entirely. He didn't speak in the heat of passion. He made calculated statements after being given multiple opportunities to reconsider his position. These weren't comments taken out of context. They were a direct challenge to the constitutional separation of powers." Webb shifted tactics. "Your Honor, Commissioner Torino has served this city with distinction for over 2 decades. He's received commendations from federal agencies, state officials, and community organizations. He's never been arrested, never been disciplined, never been accused of corruption or misconduct. Surely his record of service warrants some consideration in this matter." Judge Caprio's expression remained unchanged. "Counselor, I don't doubt your client's service record, but distinguished service doesn't grant immunity from contempt of court. If anything, it makes his behavior more
troubling. A police commissioner should understand better than anyone the importance of respecting legal authority. His position gives his statements more weight, not less. When he declares that court orders are optional, he's not just speaking for himself, he's speaking for an entire department. Commissioner Vincent Torino walked into that courtroom believing his badge made him untouchable. He left in handcuffs, learning that no position places anyone above judicial authority. Judge Caprio proved that when power challenges power, the Constitution wins every time. Respect for the law isn't negotiable, regardless of rank, influence, or years of service.